If you're sick and tired of narcissistic relationships, I want to share a really clarifying perspective that summarizes all of this BS in about 15 minutes. And I hope you find it helpful on your journey, wherever that may be. Most of us are enduring the pain of evolving past unconscious relationships. I'm not sure how you'll understand this, but I'll try and explain it in a really basic way. So wherever you are on this journey, you're able to take something useful from this perspective. Please remember that my intention is to provide you with information so you can make an informed decision. Let's remember that the quality of our lives depend on the decisions that we make. Just take what resonates and leave the rest behind. So what does it mean when I say unconscious? This word can be used in a variety of contexts. For example, it can mean to be stuck in a perpetual state of pain and suffering. Unconscious behavior implies being in a hypnotic trance-like state, repeating what we've been programmed to do, say, and think. It basically means not to be aware of. It means that you just don't know, you don't realize, so you tend to react to life instead of responding to life. Unconscious relationships are based on a lot of fear and a great need to control. They're based on emotional immaturity. You might see a rigid attitude and a lack of self-responsibility. They're filled with blame. They're very repetitive and predictable, and there might be a very convincing illusion of being wise, but it just feels really superficial. Unconscious relationships are basically old ways of relating to one another. However, we are going through a paradigm shift. So there are many people who are waking up from unconsciousness, which means they are becoming aware and they're feeling the pain of all of these unconscious, repetitive ways of relating that were based on strict rules that we had to adhere to, family expectations, remaining in relationships out of obligation and duty. We had to have a loyalty and allegiance to someone or something external that reigns supreme in life. So you'll notice with narcissistic relationships, the narcissist will resist coming to consciousness. In fact, they are unwilling to grow, to evolve, to even admit fault because they're right and they need to feel superior. And all the behaviors we engage in when we're in these very toxic relationships, they're all about keeping us in the dark, keeping us in fear, and ensuring that we remain submissive, compliant, obedient, or passive. And this could also apply to culture and religion. As we know, the narcissist or psychopath will often use culture or religion to justify their abuse and control. And so many people are now feeling the restriction of all these things. There's a growing discomfort inside of us, and we're ascertaining whether we're able to continue betraying our internal guidance. We're questioning whether we still have a need to maintain this false allegiance to this ritualistic, conditioned, indoctrinated way of life. Humanity is evolving on a mass scale from these unconscious, painful ways of relating to more evolved, conscious relationships. And those of us who can relate to that longing, we love to question things, research, read, watch videos. We're drawn to inspiring people and we naturally gravitate towards new concepts that feel more freeing, ones that are not fear-based. So how can you tell if you're evolving from these dinosaurish, regurgitated ways of reacting that we're all programmed to repeat? The first thing that you may relate to is a feeling of being alone. And you may have noticed you've outgrown everyone in your life. They may still be okay with arguing, fighting, attacking, sabotaging, undermining, and you'll start to feel a great divide between you and perhaps people you've known since childhood or even your family members. You'll start losing interest in your old friends. If these relationships or environments are not supporting your evolution and your newfound interests, you'll start intuitively distancing yourself. You'll have no interest in engaging in those convoluted conversations about who did what to who, whose fault is it. You'll start caring less about the past, and you'll notice yourself shrinking back when you're around these type of conversations or people. You may feel so restricted that eventually the disharmony between the old you and the new you, who is beginning to have no common ground with the old way of relating, the discrepancy will start to feel painful. But that's not a bad thing. Consider it like growing pains. Let me clarify this. The new you is actually the authentic, real you, whom you've always felt was buried deep inside. The old you was a false identity, a role that they manipulated you to believe you were. The small person you had to remain in order to survive this dynamic. If you can relate to what I'm saying, you've probably outgrown this energetically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. You're not just tired, you're over it. And you'll notice the ridiculousness of it all. For example, the old way of measuring success of a relationship was time. So the longer you endured in silence, the more that you tolerated someone's dominance over you, apparently that was a good thing. So a 40-year of marriage based on submission, covert abuse, and based on basically you existing, that was overlooked, and it wasn't important how you felt the whole time. But all that mattered was that you endured 40 years of time in that marriage. So there was a false allegiance to this sort of toxicity instead of your own integrity. See, unconscious relationships are based on allegiance to family roles. Despite how toxic or destructive or abusive they were, you somehow felt under oath to remain in your allocated family role. These relationships are based on hierarchy, where the person at the top must be respected, despite you observing how disrespectful they are toward everybody else. The old paradigm relationships, which are dissolving now, are also based on dependency, where we were indoctrinated to believe that we need these people for our survival in the world. There were rules to obey and follow, certain ways of doing things, because that's how they've always been done. And there was a heavy burden of expectations. And we start feeling the restriction of all of this, the entitlement, the expectations of who we should be. If, however, you're evolving to a higher level of consciousness and you're starting to feel a lot of discomfort within these dynamics, you may be seen as a threat to those who still want to remain in these old ways of relating. So you might become a target for bullying. They may intimidate you or imply that you're gone crazy. They may resort to trying to control you with their anger, manipulate you emotionally with use of pity, or their final straw might be cutting you off from the family or completely shunning you out of their life, because they want you to think that their way is superior and it's the only one way. So if this is occurring, you might be in a transition stage where you doubt your new need for greater freedom. Maybe you'll start feeling guilty about no longer being able to do things out of obligation. Perhaps you're starting to feel so much better by just being by yourself or keeping company with more light-hearted people who genuinely show an interest in you. See, conscious relationships are structured differently. They are based on equality, mutuality, and respect. There is no need to control because no one is better or more superior than anybody else. Each person's unique contribution is valued, and conscious relationships are also based on transparency. There's no secrets to keep or information to withhold. There's no blaming, shaming, or passive-aggressive behavior. There's more of a tendency to wanting to be more responsible for your own emotions instead of blaming someone else for causing your emotions. So there's a focus on self-accountability. And yes, we can still have different viewpoints and disagree, but disagreements and not being able to find common ground with someone is never at the expense of another person's self-worth. Both people in a conscious relationship will be there because they choose to be there, not because they have to, or because they've been manipulated to stay there, or because they have a history, so that means they're tied forever. No, every day is a choice to remain in this relationship with this person who is willing to evolve with you. This is a partnership where two participants who support each other's personal growth, who inspire each other to develop their unique gifts. Conscious relationships are based on harmony and cooperation, on having a shared purpose and meaning. And I think most of us feel a longing for those sort of relationships because we've had so much of all this unconscious way of relating. So if you're currently evolving from one state to another, know that it is not your place to change the other person, to beg them, to convince them. Discern who or what is hindering your growth. And certainly don't judge yourself harshly for wanting more happiness, love, connection, and intimacy. See, narcissists have malevolent intentions and they will sabotage your wanting to evolve, to grow, to become more authentic. They will create the hugest dramas, problems, guilt trips, and bombard you with shame, all in an effort to keep you bound to their preferred unconscious pattern, which ensures that they can control your destiny. And let me be really clear. What you tolerate will continue. The bad behavior that you justify or rationalize on their behalf will also continue. It is never okay for anyone to intentionally demean, humiliate, terrify, or belittle another person. Remember, they truly believe they are godlike and are entitled to making decisions for your life. So notice this sooner and disengage. See it for what it is. Don't give yourself a hard time for wanting to be a better person, for having been blessed with curiosity or wanting to learn how to make yourself a better person. And see these old relationships like a tight old shirt that you've outgrown. Narcissists will offer resistance to your evolution, to your peace, to your experience of love, compassion. All of that is seen as a threat. And even saying that sentence out loud, you can hear how inverted and toxic that is. So please don't waste any more time than you need to. Learn to take direction from your own inner guidance. Discern what no longer serves you. Discern between what's draining you and what's uplifting you. Trust that no one externally can give you direction, otherwise you'll forever remain a victim. Your inner authority, your alignment with what feels true to you is your path to living an authentic life. We can complain about narcissists, we can fight and become depleted, or we can intelligently, non-judgmentally observe what this person is demonstrating and ask ourselves, is this relationship supporting my growth? Am I in a futile situation that I'm not willing to confront? Too often we don't want to accept the reality of what is being shown to us, and we cause ourselves suffering. So accept people when they show you who they are. We are the change makers, and it doesn't mean we have to fight, scream, yell, force, convince anyone. That's the old way of doing things. We need to start to understand that doing things out of love is a much more powerful standpoint than doing things out of fear. The most loving thing that we can do is be true to ourselves and no longer participate in living a lie. We are educating ourselves, creating new ways of relating to one another. We're unlearning a lot of the BS we were programmed with to believe was normal. And just on an end note, situations that are not meant for your highest good will cause you discomfort, pain, anxiety, but these are just indications that you are no longer in alignment. You need to let go and stop trying to squeeze back into a box or label that someone else has defined you as being. You have outgrown their definition, and you're realizing that their limited definition of you was BS all along. You're so much more than they told you you are. You're starting to realize what's possible for you and what you're capable of. See, enduring, surviving anything is the old way of doing things. Within conscious relationships, there's ease, there's flow. Yes, sometimes there is living in ambiguity. Please stop waiting for someone who doesn't value you to tell you who you are or what you should or should not be doing. because that is the job of your intuition, and it is your place to up the volume on your heart. If you constantly look for direction outside of yourself, you're back in the slave mentality. And that is why we all need to continue developing our own critical thinking ability and learn to make some very difficult decisions courageously. So if you're sick and tired of narcissistic relationships, let your life be the example of your newfound beliefs and demonstrate through the choices that you make the sort of future that you want to create.